We're back from the holidays here at Piss Drinker Nation, and there is a load of good stuff from the Midwest that I have to try, including right now the classic Zombie Dust, the most highly sought after pale ale in the Midwest, still very hard to find and a little bit old-fashioned perhaps. At least that's what I've noticed when I had it several times when I was in the Midwest. And this is the first time I've been able to find it in bottles. And it's a single hopped Citra Pale Ale that I think was one of the first. It came out 4 or 5 years ago first, to use just Citra in all its glory in a pale ale. And this one was bottled on December 22nd, so it is 2.5 weeks old, not quite 3 weeks old yet, so very fresh. And I had it a couple times and thought this is a good pale ale, but it's nothing like a lot of the more recent pale ales from younger breweries in the Midwest and especially New England. But there's a lot of other great stuff in the Midwest that I had on my trip. I had this on draft, where I felt like it probably actually didn't seem that fresh. Maybe people aren't buying it on draft super often, but it's really hard to find at stores still. But the hoppiness and the intensity of the Citra, maybe it's just a different style of doing it, but that style seems like it's a little bit more old-fashioned, more of the West Coast or Stone style, or even still influenced by an English pale ale style of hopping, but it's not as intense or complex, I think, as some other Citra pale ales. But I haven't looked at it as intensely as I'm about to do right now, so let's see. This was to chip this over on the plane, but I think it should be perfectly good, and I have this new sleek glass that should display it pretty well. And this glass is kind of narrower, so if it were in one of my thicker goblets, it would look a little bit darker. As you can see, it's almost copper in this narrow style glass. The aroma is very pleasant, but I get a good yeasty and slightly toffee, but very clean, not buttery character. In addition to citrusy qualities, but it's got a caramely, citrusy, grapefruity smell to it that reminds me of old-fashioned American IPAs and such, but a little bit more juicy. And a little bit of somewhat cotton candy-ish qualities happening. Not quite dank, on the edge of being dank or resinous. But they don't call this an IPA, they call it a pale ale, and it's like 6.2 or something. They don't remember it being very bitter. It's got a little bit of sweetness. But if you look at it, it looks pretty similar to Harpoon IPA, Goose Island IPA, or Goose IPA as they call it now, so they can sell it better at sports venues. The smell is nice, it's pretty strong. This glass helps to push it out in an intense burst of aroma. And it's very pleasant, but it's not a juicy tropical explosion of pineapple and everything, which people weren't really using to create, like they weren't creating flavors in beers too much 5 years ago, so this is kind of like maybe a step towards that, and people realizing, oh, we can just use these new crazy hops and get new aromas. But I feel like a lot of progress is made since this is released, and they've kind of stuck with the same formula or something, but it's very pleasant. I have some toasty Cheerios malt. mixed with ruby red grapefruit and some red berries. Actually, I got a lot of berry kicks or fruity pebbles happening, but not sweet or grapey, quite like a Scotch ale, but not too far off from that. I mean, bitter and dry mainly, but the flavors aren't a special tropical sort of quality. It's like maybe if you drizzled some caramel on top of pineapples, but it isn't that bright. It reminds me of some Cascade Pale Ales a little bit. The way it feels on your tongue is very nice. It isn't a very light, fluffy, and grainy feel with a lot of textured yeast chalkiness like a lot of juicier, newer wave pale ales are. This is more of a caramel, smooth, and kind of coats your tongue a little bit more. It's just what people were used to in American beers that are almost completely filtered. Like, you can see how super clear that is. You can see my head through that pretty easily. It's very good, but it's from this weird era of beer that I feel like has started to change in the last couple of years. Even that's happening very quickly, I guess, with beer. I've noticed in some of the other Three Floyds pale ales and beers that the yeast gives a really astringent bite to them, and I guess that's a lot of times in their IPAs and some of their more bitter beers, but it works well in this. It has just a little bit of sweetness, and it's not too high on the IBUs, and that's also what makes it work well. I think it was just a good combination of how they use their yeast with the way they use the hops and the malts and everything, which is actually probably what makes a lot of beers stick out in their time. And it's very well done. I like it more than a lot of other Three Floyds beers, but it's something that if it were available all the time, I don't know, I probably wouldn't buy that much. They know how to ride the hype forever, I guess, in a way. I keep thinking English IPA a little bit, and the style. It's a little bit bolder, using American hops, but that light toastiness and sort of biscuity quality. It's not buttery, but then it's super dry. There's a little bit of a straw, wicker chair quality happening. That it almost reminds me of Timothy Taylor beers. Not as intense, but it has that berry flavor and a little bit of grapefruit. I don't really know if I'm getting much passion fruit, which in some Citra beers I get loads of passion fruit. Like, basically probably the opposite style of this. This is the original, maybe the original big over-the-top Citra beer. Now it's double dry hop 4-point pale ale from Trillium that just smells immensely like passion fruit and mangoes and pineapple, and you don't get any biscuity malt or kind of dry minerally yeast with those beers. It's just all about the fruit and juiciness, and this isn't like drinking juice. It's more of an old-fashioned idea of beer that you gotta have some kind of balance between hops and malt, which I've always had trouble with that word, and I think a lot of breweries are proving that that's not what beer is about. That's not how you have what your philosophy of beer has to be about. It can be about just specific ingredients and highlighting them and using them in the right way and having other ones in the background. And maybe this does sort of this old-fashioned balance perfectly. But there's more and newer, more exciting ways of doing it. I'm enjoying this a lot, but I'm just going to give my last bottle away to friends for them to try it, who haven't tried it before. And it's kind of hard to rate this, because I'm not going to rate it influenced by everyone else who's been influenced by everyone else for the last 4 years, who's been struggling to find this beer. I think I'm going to give it like an 8. And it's still very fresh, very good quality, very high quality, very well made beer. They put it all together in a great way. But it's nothing that is expanding my mind and my taste buds. And in these reviews, to get in the higher ratings, it has to do that a little bit. It has to be really complex. And this just takes little bits of each ingredient and puts them together in a way that's really pleasant, but doesn't take my taste buds to new places. I'm enjoying it a lot. But 3 Floyd Zombie Dust, 8 out of 10. Try it if you can, but don't try that hard.